Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tired F1 Pod with me, Shez, coming to you after a pretty interesting qualifying session. Um, Lando Norris again monstering pole ahead of his teammate and Max Verstappen. But we're going to talk about something a little bit different to come out over the weekend, and that is to do with Lewis Hamilton and his driving style. So we have been talking on this channel at length about why Lewis might be on the short end of a qualifying deficit to his teammate George Russell, and a little bit of detail came out this weekend from both Andrew Shovlin at Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton himself. And we're going to look at a couple of quotes. But I do want to highlight that this is again more evidence that suggests that the reason that Lewis is not getting on top of George in terms of the qualifying record is not because he's old or not motivated and doesn't have it anymore, but there's a fundamental issue with the way this car works, and perhaps even with the philosophy of the ground effect cars that have come out since 2022 that is directly opposed to the way that Lewis wants to drive the car. So I'm going to give you the quotes first, because and we'll keep coming back to them as we go, because I think they're important. So the first one is from Andrew Shovlin. He says, "It's particularly he's struggled on a single lap." By him, he means Lewis. "So his long run pace is always there, and that's been really useful. It's more just the way that he wants to attack a corner. When you do that, then the car would snap to oversteer. You start to build tire temperature. So most of our work has been trying to give him a car that you can drive the very attacking style, extract the lap time out of it without it just sort of breaking away on the way in and catching him by surprise." And Lewis sort of backed that up, and he said this: "It is more on a knife edge than ever, and it doesn't like when you break late and deep and make a V of it. Just keep that in mind. You have to brake early and run off and roll the speed in. And I hate that. That's just not me. It's not my way of driving." So we have talked a bit about Lewis's driving style on this channel, and we've talked about that V. We talked about that he's probably the proponent, the best example of getting the most out of that V style of attacking a corner. But maybe that's not working right now. I know a lot of you guys listen to Peter Windsor, and Peter Windsor talks a lot about short corners. I think I agree with him to an extent, but I think it's a broad generalization of how these guys extract time out of a car. The idea being that you maintain a high minimum speed through the corner. You do what you need to do to maintain that high minimum speed through the corner. And essentially that means that you spend less time in the corner, more time on the straight, short corner, right? But the way that drivers create that short corner is different. And I think it's more about turning, and it's much more to do with the style that each driver has to get the car turned into the corner in the first. So for me, the three fastest drivers over one lap on the grid right now are Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell. George is a bit of an outlier in that I still think he's very much a raise the floor kind of driver. Like, he bludgeons the car a little bit into doing what he wants it to do. So it doesn't really matter what the style of the car is, what the predominant characteristic of that car is. He will just get the most out of it. And I think that is why he is one of the fastest on the grid right now, because it doesn't matter what the car is doing, he'll get a lap time out of it. But we haven't really looked at his driving style in great detail. And we won't do that today, but we will do it another time. But Max and Charles are very interesting, and we have talked about them in previous videos, and I will leave a link for their videos at the end of this one. Max is very much a driver that needs a good front end. So he will brake a little bit earlier, roll the car in, but that rolling the car in involves him floating the car in to the apex, drifting it in, and living with a loose rear end. And I say that very specifically. He lives with a loose rear end. Doesn't necessarily want it, but he lives with it. And that's how he gets the car rotated and straightened up for the next straight. Whereas Shah, which you can see in the video that I'm putting up now from our video on his qualifying characteristics, he wants a loose rear end. In fact, he invokes it. So he brakes and then he takes a little stab and then he takes a big stab, and that unsettles the rear end, allows him to rotate the car, get through the corner quickly, and then straighten up again for the next straight. But that's very different to how Lewis does it. Now, I've got the telemetry here from his Jeddah lap this year. We looked at this when we did our Jeddah telemetry, and this is Lewis versus George Russell. And again, looking at my delta, so you can see how out of turn 3, he has a big delta loss. So George is the reference line, the flat turquoise line, and anything above that, if the white line of Lewis Hamilton is above that, it means that he is slower. And you can see that out of turn 3, 4, he is much, much slower. And if you look at the throttle trace, you can see that Lewis in the white line hesitates to put the throttle on, and on the exit of the corner has a snap of oversteer. That means he has to come out of the throttle, where George is straight. He is full throttle. That to me is a fundamental reason why Lewis is struggling with the car right now. What he likes to do is punch in late to a corner, right? He wants to brake super, super late, load up the front end, exquisitely feeling where the limit of the brakes is, where they're about to lock up, and he gets them to that point, but no further, and then rotates the car, uses that front end to rotate the car, and then be straight for the following straight. But to do that, he needs a locked on rear end. He can't have it loose, because if it's loose, then when he loads up the front end, he'll just get massive oversteer, and he'll have to put on a heap of opposite lock, and he'll lose speed in the middle of the corner. That's what Andrew Shovlin has been saying, and it's what Lewis has alluded to in that quote. It doesn't like when you brake late and deep and make a V of it. Okay, he doesn't like it. And Andrew Shovlin again saying that very attacking style causes the rear of the car to break away, catching him by surprise. Brakes late, needs a stable rear end. That's the reason for me. That makes perfect sense, and it's what we have been saying on this channel for a few months now, that this isn't to do with him losing motivation or him not having the ability anymore to keep up with George. It's an inherent problem with the way he is driving the car, and a style that has served him really well across his entire career is not working now, and he's being forced to adapt. Now, we've heard that that's what he was trying to do when we came out of the Monaco weekend, that he was going to go away and learn something new, try and adapt his style to get better results in qualifying. And now we're getting the detail about what the problem is and what he needs to do to get around that. I think it's actually incredible that over the first 3 seasons of this generation of car, that he's beaten George Russell in the qualifying head-to-head in 2022, and that he was as close as he was in 2023 with a car that doesn't respond to his driving style. He's still able to be as close as he is to who I think is one of the 3 fastest drivers on the grid right now. So that's Lewis's driving style in a nutshell, why he's struggling. If you like what we're doing here, please leave us a like. Please subscribe. We're getting close to that 1,000 mark now. And if you have any comments, please drop them in the comments below. We'll read all of them and we'll respond to as many as we possibly can. And we'll see you hopefully at some point over the weekend. See you later.